Well, good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, June 8th. It's another hot one. It's a beautiful day outside if you happen to be living in the northeast section of America. Um, I thought I would start out making a video this morning due to the fact that Hillary Clinton has clinched the Democratic nomination. This was something that I think a lot of you expected. I know I've been, not to be that guy, but I know I've been writing slash doing videos where I kind of predicted that this would happen quite a while ago, like definitely over a year ago, maybe even two. Um, I don't know, guys. There's not really a lot I can go into before I just kind of jump into my video. I think you kind of already know my feelings, but what I kind of wanted to pick apart today, only because Hillary just clinched the nomination and we kind of already know that Trump is the man for the Republicans right now. I just thought I would go into this a little bit in terms of, campaign contributions, but more importantly, without trying to overly attack the left, I'm trying to kind of pick apart some of the arguments that people are making in support of Hillary Clinton. I guess I would say from a moral as well as a financial perspective, but at the same time, um, I'm definitely trying to react to some of the things that I'm hearing from her supporters just in terms of general ideology. So, again, I'm not going to go into this in any kind of amazing detail, but if you go to opensecrets.org, which is a pretty good website, you can check out, campaign contributions from all different election cycles and politicians, and you can look at it by sector and you break it down all different ways. And, without getting into it too much, I've been Googling these different groups that have been, contributing to Hillary. And over the course of her career, because that was another page I brought up, I try not to overload my computer with too much work when I'm making a video, because anything beyond 5 or 6 tabs and we risk my computer exploding right in front of me. But basically, what you're going to see over the course of her career are mostly donations from banks, Wall Street investment groups, and private capital, hedge funds, things like that. In the most recent cycle, you see a lot of, capital fund management. These are all hedge funds. Obviously, we know about Soros and all the, stupid crap he's involved in overseas, helping to fund revolutions and just doing all kinds of horrible stuff in terms of influencing foreign policy. A lot of you guys are probably familiar with Soros and the things he's done. To get into that in detail would probably be best suited for another separate video, but just something you might want to Google if you have no idea about it. But anyway, the overall point I want to make, if you look into this a little bit on your own before I move on, is just that it's a lot of big money people making these contributions. And then, of course, you see some other troubling groups on here, like the Center for Middle East Peace, which has nothing to do with peace. The Center for Middle East Peace is essentially, an Israeli propaganda voice is essentially all it is, if you look into them. They spew lies about the conflict, and it's just another group to make it look like the Israelis are trying to secure their country, when in reality what they're trying to do is secure the land and the resources that they want, such as the Leviathan oil field. But anyway, one thing, again, I'm just pointing out kind of main ideas here, and I saw this group, Emily's List, which you guys might have heard of, which was I believe so far the largest overall contributor to Hillary during her career. It's a group, as you can see here, that wants to get female Democratic pro-choice candidates into office. I don't know, guys. I mean, this is kind of something I just put out there for your thoughts. I find it somewhat troubling when a group wants to elect someone based on a factor which has no, I guess I would say, no effect on how valid that person's leadership abilities are. What I mean by that is trying to elect someone based on their gender, their color, their creed, etc. My feelings on things like racism and sexism and things like that are based on the fact that if you look at that topic from one perspective, and you say to yourself, well, this seems to be kind of biased or, again, sexist or racist, then you shouldn't be able to then flip it around and make the same argument. So, in other words, if I had a PAC out there that was raising money and, I just called it whatever, Mikey's List, and let's say it was all about getting, let's say it was a group dedicated to getting pro-life Republican male candidates elected to office. I have a slight inclination, just a slight one, guys, that the press would probably want to nail me to a cross for doing that. Um, so, what I kind of think when I look at topics like this is, again, there are certain things that I'm okay with. I happen to be pro-choice. I don't really happen to care who people are supporting. I'm not really someone who supports the political system as a whole. But, for me, again, to have a group which supports pro-choice Democratic females, if you flip it around, it sounds ridiculous. If we had, pro-life male Republican, PACs, things like that. And a lot of people will defend that and basically say, like, oh, well, women are, downtrodden and they need a voice, and, well, these are things you should just be supporting anyway, and you have to be sensible. And I think this is what turns a lot of people off about the left, is they tend to have this sort of, we know better than you, so we're just going to kind of do whatever we want mentality. Like, if you don't agree with them, it's because you're not smart enough to see the light, apparently. I don't know. But to me, it's senseless to have a group which simply raises money for pro-choice female Democrats. You're not really supporting who you think is the best candidate. You're kind of just seeing who you can, put your support behind and then extract money from. So I'm sure that this group is going after, donations from obviously a lot of people that want to donate to Hillary secretly, because the money will come from Emily's List and not from, the individual. That's why PACs exist in the first place. But really what it's about is the fact that I just don't see how, if you're going to support a candidate, I don't see how you can do it around anything rather than ideology. I don't see how being a female or being a male or being white or being black or being anything other than a good person and a smart individual makes you a good candidate, assuming you're going to be a candidate and assuming that you're going to be a voter. So to me, to have a group that just, decides to support pro-choice Democratic female candidates, it seems just like a money grab to me. And I just kind of want to point things like that out. Hillary has been really pushing the whole I'm the first female candidate angle, and it's just obviously such a vote grab. I mean, she literally, you can go on YouTube and watch the videos where she's saying, oh, who could be more of an outsider than the first female, candidate? And I mean, that's just, you almost wonder how she could pull that off without breaking into laughter herself. I mean, she's just so obviously the establishment candidate. I think that her attempts to hide that may actually hurt her more than just embracing it, because nobody really believes that except for maybe the most brainwashed feminists out there. And even then, it tends to be older ones, because the younger feminist crowd, the millennials, has mostly embraced Sanders, who now seems to be completely screwed. That being said, I think that Hillary's going to have some trouble earning support from those people. But, I should be moving on at this point, guys. I just wanted to point out that some of this stuff to me seems to be rather pig-headed and just rather militant. I think that to support a candidate, no matter what, based on the fact that they're female and pro-choice, it doesn't have a lot of basis in reality. I think that there are bigger issues we could be looking at. And generally speaking, I think it would benefit these groups to kind of widen their range of topics in which they concern themselves with. So, moving on, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but you'll see obviously a lot of, capital investment groups, money people on this list of contributors to Trump. Not as large as Clinton, but just something I wanted to point out. You guys should be looking at it equally on both sides. I'm gonna probably get around to doing some kind of video where I tear Trump apart as well. I don't know. Part of me just looks at it like I have so much time and I have, so many things I want to try to get across to you guys. And since I pretty much know that Trump is going to get rolled in this election, I just almost wonder if it's worth my time. But, you know, for the information I can maybe provide and just for the sake of trying to demonstrate that I'm looking at things equally, it might be worth doing. But that being said, today is Hillary's day, so we're focusing on her. Now, one of the topics that I like to bring up, and I was talking about this during Obama's time raising money for his elections because of how many banks were donating to him and the lack of prosecutions following those contributions, surrounding the 2008 financial crisis and things like that. Um, I found an interesting article here where, there's tons of links talking about this group, which you might have seen on the last link that I had up, Renaissance Technologies. You can see they're a hedge fund founded by billionaire James Simons. Now, they donated all this money to Ted Cruz. Now, at the same time, Euclidean Capital, which was the second largest donor to Hillary, is owned by the same guy. So obviously we can see here, you own different groups, you have different companies. It's pretty easy to play both sides of the fence because on the one hand, uh, you look at Renaissance and you say, okay, they're donating to Cruz, they're Republican, and then you look at Euclidean and they're donating to Clinton and you say, okay, they're Democrats, but what you don't see is that, this big guy at the top, James Simons, is playing both sides of the fence and making sure that whoever wins owes him a favor. This is how it works, guys. So, number one, everybody that wants to call out all these contributors, I think you might need to look at their history and see if they're donating, to your enemies or, things like that at the same exact time. Because a lot of Democrats might be upset to find out that Simons donated so much to Cruz and vice versa with the Cruz and the Republican supporters. But for me, it's more important that you guys kind of see how this works because this is how it goes. And moreover, I think that people will often associate big money and especially Wall Street and the big banks with Republicans. It's kind of just a stereotype, but if you look at the actual money trail, I mean, far and away, guys, so much more money is going to the Democrats from these groups. There's just no denying it. I mean, if you research it for 5 minutes or 5 years, you're going to find the same result. There's just no denying that Wall Street is very, very, very pro-left. Now, they're more concerned with playing both sides of the fence, as you're going to see here, but generally speaking, I would say Wall Street investment groups, Wall Street banks are supporting definitely center-left, Democrat, liberal candidates. Now, some of these links might be important for you to click on. There's some interesting things here that kind of conflict, with sort of left-wing ideology. So you've got these groups being accused of tax evasion and trying to get tax evading privileges, whatever. And you might be saying, oh, it's Bloomberg, oh, it's John McCain saying that. Still worth looking into, guys, because everybody does it. The only difference between the supporters of the Republicans doing it and the supporters of the Democrats doing it is when the supporters of the Republicans do it, it makes the newspapers. When the supporters of the Democrats do it, it doesn't make newspapers, and they lie and say that Wall Street is for the Republicans. But anybody who looks up the money trail, which is obvious and very easy to find if you have a computer and the internet, will see that all those banks donated extremely heavily to Obama. They still donate to Clinton. And the only reason that a lot of them ended up flipping over and donating to Romney later on in 2012 was because Obama, in an effort to kind of salvage his reputation, which was going down at the time, he called out the banks. He had that kind of famous speech where he used the phrase fat cat banksters and things like that. And this sort of just goes back to the whole, what I like to call like a silent contract between the big banks and especially just any big corporation and the government, where corporations and the big banks kind of take the hit for government policy because everybody already hates them anyway. And so it kind of erases any fault that the individual politician would have for the actions of those companies. But that being said, look at the timing. Look at when the financial crisis happened. Look at who those banks were donating to at that time, and look at how none of them got prosecuted. And I think you'll see where the money trail leads you. Now, at the same time, I just had to point this out. Maybe you guys saw on my Twitter, I'm taking some shots at Friedman here. I don't usually waste my time with things like this because I know it's basically just aimed at getting clicks from an unintelligible left-wing readership. But that being said, this article that Thomas L. Friedman wrote, Dump the GOP for a Brand New Party, if you take all the things he's basically saying, you could apply probably 80% of his criticism right back to the Democrats. Obviously, he's going over things like gun laws, and I love how this is like a typical liberal kind of tactic. They'll use things like common sense gun laws. Liberals don't prefer to debate you on things or use numbers. They prefer to just kind of use rhetoric in order to formulate their arguments. So if you don't agree with them on gun laws, you're not following common sense, and their laws are just common sense. And once again, like I was saying earlier, if you don't agree, it's because you're just not smart enough to see their viewpoint. Even though every statistic out there has really, I mean, I've done videos on this and articles on this already, guys. You can go back and check it out. But the whole gun issue is just so insane. I mean, in areas where there are more guns, it's safer. In areas where there are less guns, it's less safe. In areas that have the harshest gun laws, cities like Chicago, tons of urban centers, you have more shootings, more guns, more going on. This is a way oversimplified way of looking at it, but since I've already done work on this, I don't feel the need to go back and, do all this again. But interestingly, for being such a common sense law, there seems to be a lack of numbers to support it, a lack of data to support it. But anyway, I just wanted to point this out more as like a tactic that they'll use. They use things like that. You'll see this later on with climate change. Nobody wants to talk. Nobody wants to actually do, research. They just want to pay off scientists to get more grants, so they say what the government wants, and then they use phrases like climate denier and once again, everything has to be common sense, and if you don't agree with them, it's because you don't have common sense. Again, Democrats prefer to lean much more on rhetoric than on data. Not that the Republicans lean too much on data, but that being said, the Democrats have this kind of strange thing where even if you're not really like supporting Republicans, they'll still accuse you of being a kind of like right-wing nut or something like that for denying certain aspects of their positions. Just because I don't support their positions on gun laws and climate change certainly does not mean I'll be voting Republican, because I will not be doing so, nor will I be telling anybody to vote Republican or to vote in general or to support Trump. I don't really care. If Donald Trump dropped out tomorrow, it wouldn't bother me a bit. So I'm just telling you guys how I feel. If you go through, this article, it's pretty interesting because they talk about, again, selling itself off to the highest bidders, policy by policy, the Tea Party, big oil, the gun lobby. Well, once again, if I talk about the Democrats, could I be talking about big banks, Wall Street investment firms, hedge funds, people like that? Does anybody forget about 2008? Does anybody forget that we're kind of supposed to hate the big corporations and all these banks that got bailed out and then ended up making record profits and they gave record bonuses to themselves? Yeah, they donated to the Democrats, you guys. So, but let's not talk about that. Let's just talk about the Tea Party, right? Because they're crazy. And, just going on, I mean, again, I don't want to delve into this too much because it's going to look like I'm just whining or whatever, but it's pretty messed up, guys, because these arguments could be so easily flipped around. It's just crazy to me. And, I think that this is reflective of the desperation that kind of typical left-wingers like Friedman see. People like Friedman want Hillary to get elected. They're very concerned, even though they won't bring it up. They're very concerned with the Israel-Palestine issue. They know that Hillary is in bed with the Israelis. They know that she's going to do whatever the Zionists tell them to do. They know that she is going to be a war hawk when it comes to Middle East policy. She has no qualms about that whatsoever. And instead, they're going to use these tactics to try to gain support for her from average supporters and, of course, targeting a New York audience, a lot of former or perhaps still current Sanders supporters whose support they're going to need, if Hillary wants to be sure to clinch this election, even though, in my opinion, she might as well start picking out, the drapes for the Oval Office because, she's already won this election. So that being said, I don't really think this article is that worth reading. It's kind of just an examination of the propaganda and the day-to-day thinking and the senselessness that I think the average person who is voting for Hillary or perhaps considering voting for Hillary is facing. And we need to kind of start applying the arguments that these people are using to our side as well. When you talk about selling yourself off to the highest bidder, let's not forget that Hillary Clinton has more money behind her than anyone. She's selling herself off to capital, investment, hedge funds, big banks, Wall Street, fat cat banksters, rich guys, however you want to call it. Billionaires are donating their money to Hillary. She's not the little guy, or should I say the little, woman, whatever. She's taking advantage of the fact that she's a female to gain support from females who would rather vote for a female than do research and find out what their candidate is actually all about, because somehow they think that being a woman is going to inherently make her a better candidate, even though if you applied that same argument to a man, it would be considered sexist. I don't see how your genitalia either makes you suited or not well suited for the job of being the president of the United States. I don't understand that argument. I really don't, especially when you look at Hillary's positions. She comes off, to me, like any average Republican male, to be honest with you. She's a war hawk, and she's as establishment as you could possibly be. The fact that she's a woman doesn't make her not establishment. It doesn't make her not guilty as sin, what she is. I mean, she belongs behind bars. I don't know, guys. I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of people using phrases like racism and things to try to get people elected. It's just weak. I wish people on the left would start looking more at issues and more at numbers and more at the money trail than at just empty rhetoric, which is all this is. Stop following the hand. It's like we're watching a magic show, and you need to stop looking at the trick. Look at how the magician is trying to manipulate you. And just start to realize that these media pundits are not even talking about issues or data or numbers. They're just trying to get you riled up into thinking that any vote for anyone on the right is insanity and a vote for anyone on the left is going to bring us to some kind of joyous new liberal age. And at the end of the day, no candidate is going to get rid of the Federal Reserve, which is the only thing that could ever even start to salvage our financial future in this country. No candidate is going to do anything to stop Israel from leading a genocide, a modern Holocaust in the Middle East. No candidate is going to take our troops out of the Middle East, something which Obama claimed he would do within 6 months of his first election in 2008. It's 2016, we're still fighting in fucking Fallujah, you guys. No candidate is going to get rid of the influence of money in politics. The banks are still donating. The banks are still making record profits. The hedge funds are still donating. The hedge funds are still making record profits. It doesn't matter. And we need to stop thinking that somehow being a woman makes you immune to all of this criticism. Jack Dallas here. We'll talk again soon.